So thank you very much for the invitation here. It's my pleasure to be in person for the first time for a long time. So today I want to, in fact, report about some new stuff I've been doing related to models in computation and neuroscience. So it's the first time I'm talking about this. Let me see. So probably the slides will not be the best, but let's hope the content is good for you. So I'm going to start with just this to explain you a little bit the starting point of the discussion here. So I started to collaborate with two persons from the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, Helge Holden and Susanne Sulem. They are both of them in the math department there, but they have been exposed a lot about the modeling of grid cells because Moser, the Moser couple that got the Nobel Prize for the discovery of grid cells in 2014, they are there in that university. So then we started some discussions with them about models that they were using that I will show you in the next slide. And these are the results of the simulations of the PD model I will show you later. Okay, they are not their experimental data. But the amazing thing, at least at the end of the day, is that the last row coincides quite well qualitatively with what they got from experimental data. So let me explain you what the kind of experiment they were doing. What they discovered about grid cells, precisely, they call them grid cells because they produce a steady pattern of activity in certain part that I don't remember of the cerebellum, okay? Don't ask me the exact part of the cerebellum which this is located. But they discovered also that they are very much related to the navigational system of brains in mammals, doing most of the experiments for now in rats. And what they were recording is the firing of certain region of that part of the cerebellum with the movement of the rat. As you see, and I did some kind of, well, I didn't do that drawing. It's due to Susanne, which is very nice. So you have the rat that is moving in an enclosure, and they have the electrodes directly in the brain, and they can get the firing rates of the region. And they were coding the findings of this part of the region, and they discovered that they had this kind of, like you see in last row, let's just focus on the first figure of the last row. They had this kind of localized spatial patterns that look like a kind of grid, hexagonal grid. And in fact, what they were able to, this is what they were able to get experimentally. And then there have been, since then, since the discovery of the grid cells, there have been lots of experiments and models produced by several people I will discuss in the next slide, trying to first explain the formation of that steady hexagonal pattern. Let me just mention one thing, because this is about the coupling with the movement with the rat. Today I will not discuss mostly from the math point of view on that, but let me explain you how this is then coupled to something else. If you see, maybe you happen to see a dot somewhere, which is a kind of green dot in the middle. So somehow this is coupled with the movement of rats, which is something external that should be in practical coupled with the activity of another type of cells, which are called plate cells. And what they give to this, to the activity pattern on the grid cells, what they discovered in their experiments, is that somehow the hexagonal pattern of the grid cell, which is steady when the rat doesn't move, it moves with the movement of the rat. Okay? And this is how the rats, they can recover their path in complete darkness, because they somehow count up, so let's say north, south, right, and left, how many times they cross one of the spots in the activity. This is much more complicated than that, but this is somehow how it is, how they think it works, and how it's right now admitted that it works. But today I'm not going to discuss that coupling, but this is how this figure, the last row, has been produced. The gray path is where the rat is moving, and then the hexagonal pattern that you have in the second row, which is at 0 level of activity, is just moving with the movement of the rat. Now the path is just given, it's not produced by any other model. And then you see, when you cross one of the blobs of the high activity pattern, then we put a red dot. Okay? Good. So what we would like first, basic thing, is to explain from where this hexagonal pattern comes. Okay? So we started with a model that was introduced by McNaughton. It was a postdoc in the Mosers group. So Mosers, the two Mosers are in the et al. There are 5 authors in the first one, and then there are 2 statistical physicists, computational neuroscientists, Burak and Fite, that also use this kind of models, and Cowie et al. Again, Cowie, another postdoc in the Mosers lab. And these papers are from started like 10 years ago. Burak and Fite is like 3 years ago. Cowie et al. Is more probably than that, 3 years ago. If you go to the, of course, the supplementary material, and you read what they are, the model that they are proposing, they were looking at this very simple kind of model. Okay, let me explain you what it is first. S for them is the activity variable. Think about it as the firing rate locally. Okay? Think like a measure, a kind of average of the firing rate in a certain part, in a certain column of this part of the cerebellum. Okay? So S is for then activity level, which has to be a non-negative variable. Okay? And the beta here is the preference orientation. So they consider a model with 4 preference orientations, so the cardinal points, north, south, east, and west. And tau there is just the relaxation time. Phi is an activation function, as usual. So they always took as typical values ReLU or sigmoid. So positive part is ReLU. Sigmoid is an approximation of positive part. Then the firing rates depend on external inputs, as I told you, that they should be coupled with play cells, but here are assumed to be just given for what I'm going to tell you, in most of their papers. Then the next thing, the next assumption is that what is the omega, what is the spatial part? SI, I forgot to say that, is the activity level of neurons in a certain location, XI. Okay? XI belongs to this omega, and for omega, they just took a square with torus connectivity. Okay? So meaning periodicity. Okay? Just a 2D neural sheet with periodicity on the borders. In fact, there is a very recent paper of Gardner et al. Again, the Mosers and Burak are part of the authors there, in which it just appeared in Nature last month, in which they used topological data analysis to say that it's true that it should be a torus connectivity for rats. And well, seems not to be a bad assumption to start with that. And then for the WIJs, for the connectivity strength, they just took a kind of Mexican hat function. Okay, you can imagine what is a Mexican hat function for the W, and then just extend it by periodicity is what they took. And then the Wij depends on the distance, and then there is a shift. And the shift is the orientation. It's just a shift that is constant, either to the north, to the south, to the east, or to the west, but just constant. So it's just a constant vector. Okay? The same constant in each direction. Okay, so that's the starting model that they took. And they did several simulations in their paper. Burak and Fite, and then in the paper of Cowling, which they compare experiments to that basic model. Okay, so the question that, when we went to talk to them, to the Mosers, like 4 years ago, 3 years and a half ago, his question was, how robust, I mean, by the way, I forgot to say, this model recovers hexagonal patterns. But they wanted to know how robust are these hexagonal patterns due to noise. Wanted to know how stable they are. Well, for us, it was already a surprise to see hexagonal patterns in this model, even without noise. And so that was the starting point in which we entered, and we started to think, how could we answer that question? Okay, so, well, let me explain you the microscopic model that we thought first to include the noise and to give us the possibility to get to some kind of field approximation, okay? So this is a kind of variation of what we were discussing before. So now I'm gonna take M, a number of neurons. That's, I mean, neurons, you should think about groups of neurons here, really, not individual neurons, but nevertheless. In each of these N columns that you choose in this square domain in 2 dimensions. Okay, so say that you take the space points x1, xn in this square domain, and the interaction among these n times m neurons that I stack in n columns at locations xi with m neurons each is given by that, okay? So Sik, again, is the activity level at location I, neuron k, or group of neurons k at location I. And the activity function depends on, again, that average of all the activity levels of all neurons with the connectivity given by, again, xi minus xj shifted. I put the shift in the superscript beta prime, okay? W beta prime means W of x minus R beta, okay, for simplification. So I sum in all the orientations, in all the columns, in all the positions, the activity level weighted by that W. And I average over 1 over nm there. Okay, on top, I add Brownian in each of the variables. And now is a technical point. Since I need the activity level to be a positive variable, because this is what it means for them, and this is needed in the model, so I need to do something, okay? So then, what I did is to add the corresponding reflection process that I know that people here in the audience know much more than me on this, so which corresponds to this horrible problem that there has been, for instance, has been in the normal case of McKim-Blasov equation. This is quite well known by works of Lyons and Lyons-Schnitzman in '84. Okay, that what is known is that this is a way to impose that there is a reflection at s equals 0. In fact, in this case, it's very easy. It's because it's just at s equals 0. And in general, it would be this horrible problem is for a domain, and then it takes into account the normal direction and so on. But what this, in fact, implies is that there will be no loss of mass, whatever you want to call, at s equals 0. And in fact, this is the implication later on, as you will see in the PD. Okay? Okay, so this is the macroscopic model that we proposed. So what do you expect for the McKim-Blasov-like system? In this case, you send both m and n to infinity. What you expect is an equation like this. What you get is an equation for the distribution function in each orientation on the variables t, space, and activity variable, okay? And the x, in fact, for the PD, is a kind of parameter. They are parameterized by x. The x doesn't enter in any of the derivatives. They only derivatives in s. The term coming from the noise that you have at the end, and the term coming from the relaxation towards the activity, the activity function phi of phi beta that I have there, which is just a shortcut for that function in full display, which at the continuous level, if things go well, you would expect to have the full average in the whole domain of the connectivity multiplied by what? Remember that they have S, so then it will be the average of S with respect to the density. So what you would expect, the nonlinearity in this case to be of that form. What you have is the first moment in the activity level at each x, that then you average locally with the connectivity given by W beta prime in each orientation. The technical point of the Korodov problem that I was mentioning before is just that at this level, this implies that you have no flux boundary condition on S equals 0, which allows you to say that you have a good evolution of a probability density, at least formally. Then you will have your conservation of integral equals 1 if you start with a probability density. Okay, and what about X? In X, we have periodic boundary conditions. Okay, so this is what you would expect as the PD problem. Good. I didn't pay any attention at what time I started, so you tell me when it's 5 minutes too. Okay, first of all, although it's not the objective of my today's talk, because I want to concentrate more on the PD and what we have learned on the PD, let me mention that the passage from the microscopic model that I wrote 2 slides ago to the PD model that I just showed you in the previous slide can be made rigorous. And this is something that we just did very recently. It was put on archive before Christmas. And its variation is not, let me just cut the chase here. It's a variation of the Schlitzmann coupling method. And it's not the same because of the X variable. And you have to be careful with the X variable because you don't have the same cancellations as in the normal coupling method of Makin-Blasov. So you have to work a bit. And this we did with Susanne Sulem and a PhD student in Oxford, Andrea Clini of the Doctoral Training Center in Random Systems. And we proved that you have the D1 there is Wasserstein distance 1, the distance between the empirical measure with respect to the solution of the Makin-Blasov equation of the previous slide, taking the expected value because we have the empirical measures are random variables on measures. Then you do the sub in T, it decays like that with a constant that depends on the initial data and the time that you fix. And the interesting thing is that you have the 1 over n plus 1 over n there. Because of the tricky thing that you need to do in X and S. But I don't claim it's a super result. It's just that you have to do a bit more than just the coupling method of a Schlitzmann. Okay, and then you have to do also some variations of the estimates of Fournier-Guillain for empirical measures because it's not, they don't apply directly. Okay. Okay, so we have a PD that is the rigorous limit now of this system. What can we learn about the PD? First of all, that's the, I mean, probably I repeat again. This is the system I solved numerically in the first slide. I did that with finite volume methods, okay? Just plain finite volume methods. I don't enter into the discussion of the numerical method, but I mean, we use finite volume methods because this is very much related to aggregation diffusion equations that I have been doing for many years. So we knew that they were good methods for keeping the structure of the model, although here there are no any properties to be kept apart from having a good evolution of a probability density. So the simulation that you got at the beginning, just that we remember later when I discuss, is exactly the numerical solution of this. And that one that you had there is a steady value for different values of the noises. Now I just explained the 4 columns here is by increasing the noise. So, and you see, well, the second row is for activity level, for S close to 0, and the other one is for S equals 0.5. Anyhow, you see this kind of localized steady state with the localized activity in this hexagonal pattern. And okay, so can we then use PDE to do that analysis and see if we understand the formation of those patterns? Okay, so this is what I want to concentrate now. So now, for the people in the audience coming more from kinetic theory and PDEs, so now you start thinking. The first thing that you have an spatially inhomogeneous problem. So let's look at the spatially homogeneous problem. Do we have steady solutions for the spatially homogeneous problem? So that's the first thing that we did. Let's look for a solution that doesn't depend on X. Why? Because then I want to see when it's unstable, okay? So this is very much connected to the talk of Etienne. Also yesterday, because it's very much the same idea. Let's look for something now that doesn't depend on X. So then the theorem that we were able to show is under some conditions. I wouldn't like to go into the conditions, but just to explain you some conditions on phi, on W, okay. W, essentially what I need is that the integral of W, which is W naught, is non-positive, okay? That's an important restriction. So the Mexican hat function has to be inhibitory in a sense, okay, in average. And under certain conditions on the derivative for certain quantities, blah, 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 we can show that this equation with no flux boundary condition has a unique stationary state, which is given by what you expect. But remember that here, there is a nonlinearity which is inside the phi naught, okay? So in fact, there is a consistency equation that has to be satisfied by the first moment of f, the integral in between 0 infinity of s of f infinity that I'm calling. So that's precisely that all the work is to prove that you have a unique fixed point of the last line. So what you can check is that this form of f infinity is a solution of a stationary solution. If you give me the value, let's say, of the average of f, but of course the value of the average of f has to be, when you compute now the integral of s of f infinity in terms of itself, it has to be a fixed point of the last line. So that's how we did the system uniqueness, proof that the last line has a unique, under certain conditions, a unique solution. Then you plug it in the previous formula, and you get your steady state. Okay? Okay, so the convergence towards the equilibrium here, we just check it numerically. It seems good, it seems exponential, and so on. We didn't prove it, okay? But it seems okay. No problem from the numerical viewpoint. But it would be nice to have a proof. And this is something that at some point we should have a look. So next point that we did in the first work is, okay, let's look at perturbations. Let's do linearized analysis. Now, analysis from the PD viewpoint. Can I look at perturbations of f infinity, the simplest ones, and see if I get an idea when this stationary, spatially homogeneous solution is unstable? So we did this very simple kind of perturbation with just one Fourier mode in each of the orientations. And then just to look at all the orientations together, we compute an evolution for this quantity, capital U. And linearizing, this is a lot of work that I don't expect you to just recognize, but you trust me, this is the good linearization. And when you do this kind of perturbation, you add up in the capital U, you get this linear equation now for capital U. Okay? So this is very much when, when you have reaction diffusion equations in the book Murray and you look linear stability analysis of constant. But now I have another variable, so it's a bit more complicated. Okay, so the f of k is just this function that you can write in terms of the Fourier modes of the connectivity. And this sum beta of all of the different Fourier modes in the orientation, in fact, because we chose the orientations north, south, east, and west with the same strength, this is in fact it's just a sum of cosines, okay? It's in fact real function here. Okay, this is just a bit of notation. And now also let me denote by m infinity, and I just want to point out that it depends on sigma. If you want, well, that quantity, the variance in some sense around the averageness of the steady state. So what we prove is that under the same assumptions of existence of the steady state, that I don't repeat here, existence and uniqueness of f infinity, then this specially homogeneous steady solution is linearly asymptotically stable in L2. So it's an L2 weighted, if you want, with f infinity, as long as you have this relation that for every Fourier mode, f of k is less than sigma over m infinity. Okay? And here I'm showing you for a particular w, typical w, Mexican hat function, the computation of what is f of k, and the plane is just the height sigma over m infinity. So we see that the idea would be that when we go the first Fourier mode that goes over the value sigma m infinity, in principle would be, or the largest Fourier mode that goes over sigma m infinity, in principle should be the perturbation that will pick up the highest increase at the beginning. So we do that. Then we go here, and then we check what are the largest Fourier modes compared to f of k. And that particular case corresponds to 4, 0, or I mean, different combinations, sorry, that I wrote over there. And if we look at the typical, what these perturbations will look like, they will give you, well, some of them, one gives you stripes, but the others gives you, one at least gives you hexagons, okay? So depending on the Fourier mode or you can have a combination of those, the Fourier mode that picks up, at least one of them gives you rise to an hexagonal growth, I mean hexagonal pattern, possible growth of the spatially homogeneous case. Okay, so the next thing that we did then was, can we see that numerically? So what do I mean by this? I have f infinity, which is spatially homogeneous, so there is no, if I take the average, it's just plain constant, the whole periodic square. Now, if I change the value of the noise, can I compute a kind of bifurcation diagram of the average? So that's exactly this picture that you have there. Let me explain you first the big one. So there you have the noise, I mean the average f, the interval 0 infinity of SF, against the noise, and what you have is either the maximum of that average in X or the minimum. So you see that if sigma is large, then in fact this is coherent with what we see from the linear stability condition, then it's flat. So only the stationary state, the uniform stationary state, seems to be the stable one numerically. As sigma gets smaller, then we were able to compute some bifurcation branches. How we computed this by using the solver in time, waiting for stabilization, take the steady state, and then restart a simulation with a little increasing or decreasing sigma with that as an initial data. This is called continuation method. And you can do it left to right or right to left. Why you do that? Because you want to capture if there is some kind of hysteresis also in the bifurcation, that when you go left to right and right to left, you get the same or not. So that's why we have right to left or left to right in the explanations there. And the interesting thing about this is just that you do capture several bifurcation branches numerically. It becomes a very hard problem at the exact bifurcation point. So we have some, I mean, it's not there are numerical issues with that, because you really need a very good numerical scheme to capture well the bifurcation, the point. But you have, for instance, these three bifurcation branches that all of them, they have kind of hexagonal symmetries that, I mean, it corresponds to some of the branches there. I had to remember now which one corresponds. The first one should be the first black line if I look just at the maximum that you encounter from right to left. The second one should be the dashed line. And the last one is the one that is in color, in red color, which we call eye-like pattern, okay? So this is just purely numerical observation. So at the moment, and just, how many minutes do I have? Okay, very good. So this is perfect, because I'm gonna try to write my answer, the mathematician's answer to grid cell patterns quickly. So I think the first implication of this, in terms of you want to give some information to biologists from this, is that, of course, something that you would expect, the larger the noise, the less localized are going to be the firing fields. You expect that. But the interesting thing is the second, that is a sharp value of the noise, okay? At least in this model, in which you don't have localization at all, so the rats will not be able to find themselves the way back. And the hexagonal network activity is the first that we had in the first figure. You can understand it as one of the first bifurcation branches that you get numerically by solving the problem. So can we do that rigorously? So this is what we are trying to do now with Pierre and Susanna Sulen in a work that is under preparation at the moment, in which we looked at bifurcation problem at the level of the PD. Can we show that we have bifurcation branches starting from this F infinity? And we follow a strategy that is very much related to a previous paper of mine for the Blasov with Wabalani, Pavliotis, and Slichting for the Makin-Blasov equation. We use Rabinovit's theorem for bifurcation analysis in the right setting. And, but still, there is a lot of work, because we don't understand the type of bifurcations that you may get. So that's the point where we are at the moment. And I'm almost there. I just want to thank my collaborators in the papers that are written or being written. And these are the main take-home messages. Thank you very much.
That was fast.
Thank you very much. I have a small comment concerning bifurcation analysis. That also those can be tracked numerically.
Yes.
So completely, even around the folds, let's say, that you mentioned jumps, but there are packages that let you do that too. But say
I'm aware that, I mean, you have done plenty of work on that.
Yeah.
But
I mean, there's also other, not Bani, but let's say Roman has now also new packages that do that. So there is plenty of automated things to do that. Mm-hmm. Another comment that I have is that you seem to have stated something, if I understand correctly, something along the lines of that you don't have a proof for showing that the homogeneous steady state is stable or unstable?
I mean, non-linear stable. We have only the linearization analysis, the linear analysis around the steady state, but we don't have the non-linear stable. Prove that the solutions of the non-linear problem in time will converge for the spatially homogeneous problem to the steady state. But it seems numerically, it seems that it's the case.
I thought you were mentioning linear stability, and you have done more by doing the
full non-linear one is what I meant.
Okay, I think Bruno on internet has a question.
Hello, José.
Yes.
Yes, it was a very nice talk. Thank you. I have a question about the stimulus. Actually, in your problem, you have a visual entry, which is bi beta.
Yes.
And as it is a trajectory, you expect it to have a kind of, spatial temporal profile. How do you model it in your simulation and later in the mathematical problems that you are going to address?
Yeah, as I was saying, I just used the V of t in the first simulation. In the rest, everything has been done with B constant.
Okay, so in the,
for the bifurcation analysis and for everything has been done with B constant.
Yes, in the numerics, how do you model it?
In the numerics, the V of t was given. It's a real data that comes from a paper of the Mossers, which they have the data of the path of the rat and the precise coordinates, so we just use it directly.
And what is the shape? It's a Gaussian pulse. I'd like to know how it looks like. Do you know it?
I mean, here we just took, as I said, the V of t, we just took it as given data. It's kind of comes even from experiments, if you want. So we don't model it in any way. But
I understood. But in the experiment, how does it look like? Do you know it?
This I don't know. I don't remember. But I guess it's done with the Burakan-Fitte model. But I should have a look at it. The question is, the real thing for that should be to model the place cells, and the place cells should give you the V of t. Okay, but this is another brick into the modeling. Okay, so we haven't had a look at it yet.
Okay, many thanks.
Okay, Zenanzu has a question.
Yes, can you actually hear me?
Hey, Zenan, how are you?
Oh, hi. Hi. I have a quick question. So, for the linear stability threshold, it appears that the wave number just like exceed the number, the sigma over m, that thing. Then
the m infinity depends on sigma too.
Oh yeah, exactly. So can I actually prove that for high frequency modes, those perturbations will actually decay in time?
Repeat again. For
high frequency modes, is it possible to show they will actually decay in time?
Yes. This is in part the proof that we give is that in fact we prove that the L2 norm of this quantity capital U squared that I had in the slides, it decays exponentially fast under that condition. That's right.
Oh, I see. So it will just like concentrate on certain modes.
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, thanks.
Romain, there are a lot of questions on internet.
Yeah,
there is also the end.
I think my question was just answered because I was asking for the link between the spectrum and the stability and the linear stability, but you just answer it by answering Zenandu.
Okay.
So, thanks.
Thank you, Romain.
Are you finishing on it? Or? There is a last one from Sunil in internet, and then Etienne. Sunil?
Hi, yeah. Thanks for your talk. I'm just wondering, in your model, is there any way to drive the patterns around the domain? So I think Barak and Fiat do that by by changing their kernel around a bit. I was just wondering if there's an equivalent way that you could do that in yours.
I didn't get what you said about what Barak and Fiat did. Can you repeat again?
Yeah, so I think in their model, they're able to drive their patterns around the domain, aren't they? So they've got these hexagonal patterns that kind of move around the domain.
Yes.
And I was wondering, is there any way you could put that into yours?
Yeah. This was in fact first simulation that I had in the talk, we were doing exactly that. We were moving the pattern with the movement of through the V of t.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, that was the only one that we did on that to verify that we got the same kind of picture as they had.
Okay. Yeah. I see. I see. Thank you very much.
Other questions? Okay, I had a small one because I'm really finishing it by grid cell. I'm sorry. Your noise, is it what you call noise?
Yes.
Is it equivalent in the modeling to the size of the field of the place cells that should be behind? Or, well, at least heuristically, is there a link between that and the size of the field that you have to put on the place cell? Because at the end, you have this interpretation that if there is too much noise, the rat cannot locate itself. So I was wondering.
I mean, my answer to that is very pragmatic. We put just white noise because it was the simplest thing to start and to check with the Fokker-Plan equation. But is it the more biologically interesting one? And we can give a biological meaning to the white noise, really? I'm not claiming anything there. Okay, I didn't even check with them what could be the shape of the noise for them that would make more sense, to tell you the truth.
Okay, thank you. So, thank you again. And